Masechet Zevaḥim, Daf Peh, New Mishnah, Dam Timimim bedam ba'ale mumin yishafech la'amah. If blood from an unblemished sacrifice, kosher, valid blood, gets mixed in the same cup with blood from a blemished animal, which is invalid, then now this mixture is some valid and some invalid. You cannot sprinkle it on the mizbeach, but rather you pour it down the drain in the courtyard, not usable. Kos bekosot. But now we're going to deal with a number of cases where you have separate cups, but the cups got mixed up. So you have a cup of blood from a tamim, good animal, and a cup from ba'ale mumin. So it's invalid. They're in separate cups, but the cups got mixed up. We don't know which one is which. So maybe you have many cups like this, and one of them has invalid blood in it, and the other cups have valid blood in it. Rabbi Eliezer says that you cannot sacrifice any of them lichatechila. However, if b'di'avad already one of the cups was poured on the mizbeach, then we can make a presumption that that was the cup that was invalid blood, and then all the rest of them we can lechatechila put on the mizbeach. Chachamim omrim afilu karbu kulan chutz me'achad mehen yishafech le'amach. Chachamim disagree, and they say that even if all but one of the cups were already placed on the mizbeach, nevertheless, even the last one, you cannot lechetechila put it on, but rather it has to be poured down the drain. We do not assume that any of them that were already put on the mizbeach, sprinkled onto the mizbeach, were the one that is invalid. Rather, maybe the last one is invalid, and so therefore it has to be poured down the drain. You have separate cups. Some are from korbanot that have to be placed below the red line, and they got mixed up with some that has to be placed above the red line. Above the red line is only korban hatat in animals, and most others are below the line. But now we got them mixed up. What do we do? Rabbi Eliezer omer, yiten lema'ala vero'ani et hatachtonim melema'lan kilu hem mayim ve'achzor v'yiten lemata. Rabbi Eliezer says you can use them. You'll put all of the cups, sprinkle some of the blood in all of the cups above the red line. So that will be good for all the korban hatats in there. Now what about the rest of them? Well, in those cases, the one that should be below the line, we will consider it as if it's water. It's true that you're not allowed to take korban olah or shelamim blood and put it on top of the line, but that's only if you have in mind that you're putting it there as a korban. But we will have intention that we're just putting it up there like water. It's not for a sacrificial service, and therefore we didn't violate anything. And we got all the olot, all the korban hatats are going to be valid. And then you take the rest of the blood and you pour it below the line. And that will be for the korbanot that require below the line, that'll be good. And for the korban hatat that you already did above the line, in any case, the leftover blood you're supposed to pour onto the base of the mizbeach. So you're pouring it below the line, it'll go down to the base. And so there's no problem with that either. Chachamim omrim yishafech le'amah. However, Chachamim say, no, you can't do this trick. You can't just consider it as if, rather, we don't know which is supposed to be above and which is supposed to be below, so we cannot offer any of them. Rather, they have to get poured down the drain. V'im lo nimlach v'natan kasher. But Chachamim agree that if you didn't ask, if the Kohen didn't ask the rabbis what to do, and b'di'avad, they did sprinkle it, then it is valid. Hanitanin b'matana achat, shenitarbu b'nitanin b'matana achat, natenu b'matana achat. Easy case. If you have a korban that needs one sprinkling, that would be a bechor and maaser. So if you have cups of blood that have some bechor, some maaser, and they got mixed up, so no problem. Since they all require one sprinkling, then do just one sprinkling for each of them. Mehen matan arba b'matan arba natenu b'matan arba. If it's a type of korban that requires 4 sprinklings, like a korban olah, and they got mixed up with other things that require 4 sprinklings, like a korban shelamim, so then just to make 4 sprinklings of all of every cup, and so whatever it is. Matan arba matana achat. But now here's the hard case. You have some cups that require 4 sprinklings, like korban olah, that got mixed up with cups of blood from a bechor that require only 1 sprinkling. What do we do? Rabbi Eliezer meni natnu b'matan arba. Rabbi Yoshua meni natnu b'matan achat. Rabbi Eliezer says you should put on it all four corners. Rabbi Yoshua says, no, only one corner. Amar lo Rabbi Eliezer, harehu aber al bal tigra. Rabbi Eliezer told Rabbi Yoshua, if you're going to put it only on one, and it requires four, then you're violating, do not diminish the mitzvot of the Torah. You have in there some korban olah that's supposed to be four, and you're doing only one, so you're you're diminishing the mitzvah. Amar le Rabbi Yoshua, harehu aber al bal tosif. Rabbi Yoshua says, no, the opposite. You have in there some bechor blood that's supposed to be only one, and you're going to put on all four, so you're violating bal tosif. Do not add to the commandments. Amar lo Rabbi Eliezer, lo ne'emar bal tosif ela keshu be'atzmo. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, you would violate Baal Tosif only if you have Bechor blood by itself. You know it's Bechor blood, it requires only one, and you go and do four, then it's a violation. But here, since they're all mixed together, we don't know which is which. Therefore, when you're putting the sprinkling, the extra four, it's because some of this blood requires four. So that's why I'm doing it. It's clear that you're doing it not to add, but just to make sure that you're accounting for the Korban Olah. Amar lo Rabbi Yoshua, lo ne'emar bal tigra ela keshu be'atzmo. But Rabbi Yoshua says, I could say the same argument for me, that you only violate Bal Tigra, diminishing, when it's by itself. If you have Korban Olah blood by itself, and you're only doing it one time, you're diminishing. But if it's mixed up with blood from Bechor, then you're doing it only one, because you want to, you don't know if you can do more. And so it's evident that you're not trying to diminish, but you're trying to be careful and not sprinkle the Bechor blood more than it requires. ועוד אמר רבי יהושע, כשנתת עברת על בעל תוסיף ועשית מעשה בידיך, כשלא נתת עברת על בעל תגרה לא עשית מעשה בידיך. And Rabbi Yeshua adds another argument. According to you, Rabbi Eliezer, when you put four times, you're violating Baal Tosif and you're doing it actively. Whereas, according to me, where you don't put it, you'd only put it one time, and although it's true, you're violating, in a sense, Baal Tigra because you're doing less, but you're doing it passively. And it's always better to violate a law passively, just, I didn't do it, I didn't do anything, rather than to actively violate a law. Gemara, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Lo hichshir Rabbi Eliezer ela shanaim, aval ehad lo. We saw this a couple of times before, that Rabbi Elazar, the Amorah, says that according to Rabbi Eliezer, one is permitted to put it only 2 by 2. In other words, you have a whole bunch of cups, and some are valid and some not. One is valid, others are not. Some are valid, some are not valid, and one of them goes up. That's invalid. We assume that was the invalid one. Let's say a case is there's one invalid and many valid cups. And so now you can't put any of them. One of them is already placed up, b'di'avad. We can assume that one was most likely the invalid one. But even so, the rest of them that you put, just in case there's an invalid one still among the ones that were not sprinkled yet, you have to do it in pairs. So that in every action that the Kohen is doing, he's doing 2 at a time. So at least one of them will be valid. But to do one by one, even to be Eliezer does not allow. Mativ Rav Dimi Chachamim omrim afilu karabu kulan chutz me'echat mehen yishafech la'ama. But now we have a challenge to the Rabbi Elazar's interpretation from Rav Dimi brings from the words of Chachamim, because they say even if you sprinkled all of the cups b'diavad except for one, that one should be placed down the drain. Which sounds like, according to Rabbi Eliezer, he would disagree with that and say even if there's one left, that one left can be sprinkled on the mizbeach, even though it's only one. And you said it has to be 2 by 2. Amar le Rabbi Yaakov le Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Tachlifa as beralach mai echad zug echad. Yaakov told Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Tachlifa, I will explain it to you. When it says echad in the words of Chachamim, it doesn't mean one cup, but rather one pair of cups left. And that's why the last pair of cups, that's fine. According to the Rabbi Eliezer, it's a pair, so you can bring them both. Now this machloket between Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim, we already had earlier regarding limbs of Korban Olah. Korban Olah, that's invalid, and one that's valid, and the limbs got mixed up. And so now what do? And we already said over there, let's say you have one invalid one and a few from valid ones. You can't offer any of them on the Mizbeach. But if someone came and took a head from among them and put it on the Mizbeach, so then we can assume that was the head that was invalid, and the rest of them also you can put up. So we already know this machloket. Why do we need to say it again over here with cups of blood? And the answer is Di'itmar beha kamar bi Eliezer mishum di'it abid be kaparato aval beha ema modelehu l'rabanan. Because if I only had the case regarding the limbs is done at a stage where the kapara was already done. That's why the Eliezer says you already did kapara with the blood. So the korban is already valid, and now the putting the limbs onto the mizbeach is less significant, and therefore we can be lenient and say if one already went up, so then put the rest up. But when it comes to the cups of blood, I might have thought that the cups of blood, that's what you need to get kapara in the first place. That's higher stakes. So maybe the Eliezer would agree with Rabbanan that you cannot be lenient and you have to throw them all down the drain. And that's why I need this Mishnah here. And if I only had our Mishnah here, V'itmar beha kamri Rabbanan, aval beha ema modu l'Rabbi Eliezer siricha. I would say that it's only in this case of the blood, that's when Rabbanan say, wait, you didn't even achieve atonement yet. This is very high stakes. You can't put the blood, sprinkle the blood, you have to throw it down the drain. But when it comes to limbs, maybe Rabbanan would say, oh, you already achieved atonement, putting the limbs on is not as important. Maybe they would agree with Rabbi Eliezer that once one head goes on, you could put the rest on. But that's not true, so that's why we need the other Mishnah to teach us that there's a machloket between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbanan, not both in the case of blood and in the case of the limbs. Tanan Hatam, there's a Mishnah Masechet Para that teaches Sedochit shenaflu letocha mayim kol shehu. Rabbi Eliezer Omer yazeh shete hazaot v'chachamim poslim. If one has a flask like this that contains para aduma water, now you have to use that para aduma water to sprinkle on people on the third and the seventh day when they are tamei met in order to make them tahor. And you have to just sprinkle a drop of para aduma water, but you can't just sprinkle regular water. Now here's the problem. Some regular water fell into that flask and got mixed up with the para aduma water. Now what are we going to do? Rabbi Eliezer says we will sprinkle 2 drops on the people, and that way with the 2 drops together, that will ensure that sufficient para aduma water fell on them since it's a mixture. Hachamim, however, say that the mixture is all nullified. Let's analyze their positions. Bishlama Rabbanan sabre yesh bila v'haza'a sricha shi'ur ve'en mistarfin lahazaot. We understand the opinion of Rabbanan that say there's no way around it. And sprinkling twice is not going to help. Sprinkling once is not going to be good, because Rabbanan say, yesh bila, there is thorough mixing, which means in every drop, let's define a drop, for example, as 2 milliliters. In every drop, there's going to be some para aduma water and some regular water, maybe 1 and 1, or depending on how much was mixed in, if it was equal amounts or more regular water or less regular water. Every single drop has some and some, so it's thoroughly mixed. They also say that in order to do the sprinkling, it needs a minimum amount. You can't. It has to be, let's say, 1 drop, however much that is. It has to be that much para aduma water. And also, they say that you cannot join together sprinklings. 2 acts of sprinklings are separate acts, and you have to do everything in 1 act of sprinkling. Now, if you put this all together, that means there's no way to use this para aduma water anymore, because it has to be done in 1 sprinkling. And each drop is thoroughly mixed with some and some. And you need a minimum amount. So you need a whole drop of para aduma water, and it has to be only that drop has the sufficient amount, and it's impossible to have that since it's totally mixed. And you're not going to have sufficient, and you can't do it twice. So that explains Rabbanan. But how about Rabbi Eliezer? What are his assumptions? Ela Rabbi Eliezer my kasabar. I kasabar en bila ki mazeh shedehazaot may haveh dilma tarvayhu maya ka mazeh. If he thinks that mixtures in general do not get thoroughly mixed, and you can take a drop and it might be all paraduma water or all regular water because it's not all mixed. Well, in that case, even if he sprinkles 2 drops, so what? How does that help? Maybe both drops that he sprinkled are completely regular water and there was no paraduma water. So two drops aren't going to help in that case. Ela kasabar yesh bila. Okay, so maybe he thinks that there is thorough mixture. I kasabar en hazah siricha shiur lamali shet hazaot. And if he thinks that you do not have a minimum requirement amount of paraduma water, then why do you have to sprinkle twice? You could sprinkle once, and within that 1 drop, there'll be some paraduma water, and if just even a tiny bit is sufficient, then we wouldn't have to do it twice. So it must be ela kasabar hazah siricha shiur. He must agree with Rabbanan also that requires a minimum amount. Vi kasabar en mistafin azaot ki mazeh shet hazot may haveh. And if he thinks that you cannot combine 2 sprinklings, well then when he sprinkles twice, that won't help because it's 2 separate sprinklings, so they're not going to add up. And even if he says that multiple sprinklings can join together, who says that in the two sprinklings together there will be a sufficient amount? Maybe in the first sprinkling there's half a milliliter of paraduma water, and in the second one also there's half a milliliter of paraduma water. So you did 2 sprinklings, but you need 2 milliliters altogether, and even both together have only 1 milliliter, and still will not be a sufficient amount. So that no matter what combination of things we have, we cannot understand why, according to the Rabbi Eliezer, 1 sprinkling would not be good, but 2 would be good. Amar Lakish leolam yesh bila v'hazah siricha shiur v'hachav ma'eskinan kigon shitarebu achat be'achat. Shakish says, I agree with the first and second things that you said, that things get thoroughly mixed up. And you do need a minimum requirement of a full drop. And here, we're talking about a case where the mixture was exactly equal, 50% regular water and 50% paraduma water. And therefore, in each drop, there's 1 milliliter of paraduma, 1 milliliter of regular water. If you put 2 drops together, and he thinks you can add 2 drops together, you can the 2 sprinklings join together, and you will have a sufficient amount sprinkled all together. Rava amar leolam yesh bila, vaza en siricha shiur uknasa kansu rabanan ki hechi dela mishtaresh le. Rava says, I agree with the first assumption that they're thoroughly mixed together, but I disagree with the second. I think that you don't need a minimum amount of paraduma water, any little bit. And therefore, really 1 drop would be fine, because since it's thoroughly mixed, every single drop has a little bit of paraduma water in it, and therefore, from the letter of the law, 1 drop would be fine. But the rabbis made a fine so that a person would not benefit from the added water. If you say you only need 1 drop, so now more water fell into this. Oh, great. Now, before I had only a little paraduma water, now I have a lot. I can use all of it. So then you'd be benefiting from diluting it, and we should not allow that. And therefore, as a kanas, we say that you have to now put 2 drops, use 2 drops each, so it's not going to be a benefit. We'll be more careful to make sure it doesn't get mixed up next time. Rav Asher amar en bila yazeh sheteh hazaot. Rav Asher says it's not completely mixed, and therefore with just 1 drop, you might do a drop and it might be totally regular water. And therefore you do 2 drops because in all likelihood when you sprinkle 2 different drops, then most likely we can assume that within some of those drops there is some paraduma water. He's not concerned that 2 drops are going to be purely regular water. Now we're going to ask a series of challenges. First, a challenge against Resh Lakish, and then a few challenges against Rav Asher. Metibe, we learned in a baraita, Rabbi Omer ledibre Rabbi Eliezer, hazaa kol shehu metaheret, hazaa en tzricha shiur, hazaa mechsa kasher or mechsa pasul. Resh Lakish said that according to Rabbi Eliezer, there is a minimum amount of paraduma water that you need in order to purify someone who's tameh lamet. But in this braita, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi reports that according to Rabbi Eliezer, haza'ah, even kolshehu, even a little tiniest bit of paraduma water will make the person tahor. Haza'ah does not require a shi'ur, and if you have a mixture of half kasher, paraduma water, and half pasul, liquid, just regular water or unfit water, then it's still valid because there is a little bit of paraduma water and all you need is a little bit. And so this clearly contradicts Resh Lakish's interpretation of Rabbi Eliezer, who said that haza'ah sricha shi'ur. We don't give an answer to that. Instead, we turn our attention to Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi said, according to Rabbi Eliezer, en bila, that the mixture is not completely mixed, and so there could be in every drop more of this or less of that, and therefore he requires 2 sprinklings, because if you sprinkle twice, then it's very likely that from within the 2 drops there is some para aduma water. So now we're going to challenge that. Ve'od tanya behedya hanitani lema'ala shinit arabu manitani lemata. Rabbi Eliezer omer yiten lema'ala v'tachtonim alu lo. If you have a mixture of blood that some of it is supposed to be sprinkled above the red line, korban hatat, and some of it is supposed to be below the red line, any most other korbanot. So this is that blood, the blood that should be above got mixed up in the same cup with blood that should be below. Rabbi Eliezer, it says that you sprinkle it on top first, and you'll have in mind that the rest of the blood that should be below will be just water. So you're not violating anything. And the one that's supposed to be chatat, that's supposed to be above, that you fulfilled. And then you pour the rest of it on below the line, and you will fulfill that obligation too, by which we think that means you'll fulfill the obligation of sprinkling the korbanot that need to be below. V'yamat en bila amai alulo dilma kayehib elyonim lemata v'tachtonim lema'ala. If you say, which Rav Ashi says, that according to the Rabbi Eliezer, and this is according to the Rabbi Eliezer, that a mixture does not mix thoroughly, so it could be when the bloods of these various animals, 2 animals, however many, gets mixed up in the cup, maybe all the blood on this side is supposed to be above, and on that side is supposed to be below. And maybe when he pours it, he gets all the wrong blood. Maybe that which was supposed to be that which he put lemata. Maybe that which was supposed to be above, all that blood went below, and all the blood that was supposed to be below he put above. And if it just happens to be that the mixture was not mixed well, and all the blood went in the wrong place, well then he will not have fulfilled any of the korbanot because all the blood went in the wrong place. How can you guarantee that some blood that belongs above goes above, and some blood that belongs below goes below? We have an answer. We're talking about a case where most of the blood has to go above the red line, and he places above the red line the amount of blood that would be below the line plus some more. So let's say you have 100 parts, and 51 parts supposed to go above. 49 parts are supposed to go below. He puts 51 parts above. So surely within those 50, even if all the blood that was supposed to be below goes above, that's 49, he's still putting a couple of extra above, which surely will be that which belongs above. And so there's no problem there. So certainly we can, in that case, we know that some of the blood that he put above belongs above, and he fulfilled his korban hatat offerings that are supposed to be above. But now we ask, hatachtonim alulo katani. Yeah, but it says that the ones below also are fulfilled. And since it's not mixed well, maybe all the blood that was supposed to be below went above, and now when he pours it below, none of the below korbanot will be fulfilled. And the answer is l'shem shirayim. When it says that it's fulfilled, alulo doesn't mean that he fulfills those korbanot, but rather he fulfills the mitzvah of the remainder of the korban, even the one that's sprinkled above. You have to spill out the rest of the blood below on the base. And so that's what he fulfilled. So really, we can only guarantee that he fulfills the ones above, the chatat offerings, but the ones below, we cannot guarantee. And that's not even what the Baraita meant. It only meant that he will fulfill spilling out the extra. So we answered it for Rav Ashi. But now another question, again, another challenge. We're going to have a few challenges against Rav Ashi. Tashema. Natan lemata velo nimlach. Rabbi Eliezer Omer yachzor v'yiten lemala v'atachtonim alu lo. What if the Kohen had this mixture, same case, mixture of blood that should be above and below, and he didn't ask the rabbis. If he asked the rabbis, they would have said, according to Rabbi Eliezer, put some above and some below. According to Chamim, they would say you have to spill it all out. You can't do anything. So let's say he sprinkled it below without asking. So he did below first. Rabbi Eliezer says, then he should take the rest of it and pour some of it above the line, and whatever he did below will fulfill his obligation. So now that's the question. Maybe that which he put below when he first put it without asking really was all blood that belonged above, and then when he goes and puts it above, maybe all that is blood that belongs below, and so he has not fulfilled his obligation. So why are you saying that the one that he put below fulfilled his obligation? If there's no bilah, then it could be that it's not mixed well. Here also we can say the same answer as we did before, that you have 51 parts of blood of chatat blood that goes supposed to go above. He did a little bit of blood on the bottom, but then he put 51 parts above, and so certainly some of the what went above will fulfill his obligation for the chatat. V'hatachtonim alu lo katani. Yeah, but it says he fulfills also the below obligation. Doesn't that mean the sacrifices that their blood belongs below the line? No, l'shem sheirayim. Here also he did not fulfill those obligations of korbanot, but rather only he fulfilled his obligation to pour out the remainder of the blood on the base. Tashema. Next question. Netanan lemala velo nimlach. Elu ve'elu modim sheyachzor v'yiten lemata. Elu ve'elu alu lo. If the Kohen put the blood above and did not ask. Now, if he asked, Rabbi Eliezer would have told him to do that. So it's totally fine according to Rabbi Eliezer. But according to Rabbanan, they would have told him, pour it down the drain. You cannot use this at all. However, if the Kohen b'diavad already put the blood above without asking, then everybody agrees. Rabbi Eliezer and Chachamim say that he should then go take the rest of it and pour it on the bottom. You already did it. So then pour the rest on the bottom, and you will fulfill this and that, which seems to mean you'll fulfill the obligation for the above korbanot and the below korbanot. So how could that be? According to Rav Ashi, that doesn't mix well, and so it could be that he put all the blood in the wrong place and will not have fulfilled anything. So we answer the same as before. Here also it's where you have a majority that belongs above, and he puts above the amount that is all the amount that belongs below, and plus a little bit more. So then you know for sure that some of the blood that he sprinkled above belongs above is in fact from a korban hatat, and that way he definitely fulfilled the korban hatat obligation. Elu ve'elu alu lo katani. Yeah, but the Baraita says he fulfills this and that, meaning above and below. And when you say it in this language, then it sounds like there's an equivalence. Just like he fulfills above, so too he fulfills below. And just like above, we're talking about fulfilling the obligation of the korban hatat. So too, the ve'elu should refer to fulfilling the korban hatat below. And so he should fulfill both, in fact. So you can't, what about the ones below? Maybe he put all the blood that belongs below, maybe he put it all on top. And so he will not, you can't just say he put it on the base, because elu ve'elu makes an equivalence. So we need to guarantee that some of the blood that belonged below went below, and this will not fulfill that. We answer, Mikatani elu va'elu modim, elu va'elu alulo katane. Sefatan rabbanan damre yesh bila. Wait, it doesn't say that. Does it say that elu va'elu modim, that everybody agrees, meaning Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbanan, do they both agree that the obligation is fulfilled both above and below? It does not say that. It only says at the end here, elu ve'elu alulo, that he fulfills the obligation both above and below. And so that sefa, these four words over here are only according to Rabbanan. Rabbanan thinks that there is thorough mixing. When you mix things together, and every drop will have some of this and of that. that was placed into the mixture. So therefore, according to the Banan, you do in fact fulfill the obligation for above and below. Now, according to the Banan, generally, lechatechila, you'd pour it all down the drain. But here, b'diavad, you already put it on top, so it's for sure, so it's well mixed. Some of that was for chatat blood, and you fulfill that. And then the rest, some of that is for other korbanot, and that went below, and you fulfilled everything. So, but those words are only for the Banan. According to the Eliezer, even though it says over here, Elu v'elu modim she'achzor, yes, both agree. The Eliezer, of course, agrees that you should put it on the bottom. He would say lechatechila, put it on top and then go put it on the bottom. So they all agree that you're going to put some on top and some on the bottom. However, only Rabbanan will say that you fulfilled the obligations of korbanot for both. And Rabbi Eliezer would say you fulfilled the one above because you put most of the blood on top, but the one on the bottom you are not guaranteed to have fulfilled. You only fulfilled placing the shirayim on the base. Another question, Tashema. Hanitanin b'matana achat shenit adabu b'nitanin b'matana achat. Yinatenu b'matana achat. It said back in the Mishnah that if you have a korban like a bechor or a maaser, and their blood gets mixed up with each other, and they're in the same cup. It could be different cups too, and they got mixed up. Then you place one. Now we're talking about one cup because we have to talking about bila. So we're talking about a case where it's placed in one cup. So since both of them require only one placement, so you put one placement on the mizbeach, and then you fulfilled your obligation. V'amart en bila amayi natenu b'matana achat dilma mahayg kayahib or mahayg la kayahib. If you say that things are not thoroughly mixed, which is what Rav Asher says, then how does it help to do only put one time? You just put one drop from the mixture onto the mizbeach. Maybe that one drop is all from the bechor animal and none from the maaser animal. So then how could you say that he puts one placement and then he fulfills all the obligations for all of the korbanot of the blood that's mixed in there? So how could that be? And the answer is kigon shenit adabu achat be'achat. We're talking about a case where the blood was mixed equally, equal part from the bechor and equal part from the maaser. And therefore, even if you say en bila means it's not mixed thoroughly, but it is still somewhat mixed. So if you say yesh bila, that means even if you have just a little bit of one kind of korban and 10 times, 20 times some other korbanot, you can assume that within every drop there is a little bit even of that one part that went in. That's yesh bila. En bila says if you have a big distribution, 10 of one and one of the other, then it's not mixed well, and you're going to say any drop that you take probably has from the majority, from the 9 parts, but may not have any from that one part. That's what it means when we say en bila. But if it's equal parts, 50-50, let's say 2 korbanot, one maaser, one bechor, and it's the same amount of blood for each, even the opinion that says en bila is not thoroughly mixed, it's still somewhat mixed, and therefore you can assume that there is some blood within this one sprinkling that you do. Some of the blood is from the maaser and some is from the bechor, and therefore you fulfilled both obligations. Okay, same question from the continuation of the Mishnah that says matan arba b'matan arba. If you have a korban that requires 4 sprinklings with another korban that requires 4 sprinklings, and the blood gets mixed together. And so in this case, what do? You sprinkle it 4 times. But if you say en bila, we have the same question. Same question of maybe since it's not mixed well, and you put the 4 sprinklings, all those 4 sprinklings could be from only one korban of the blood that mixed in there, and not any of the other. And that would be true if there's a lot more blood from one korban and a very little blood from the other korban, and it's not mixed well. Then you cannot guarantee that you have representative blood from all of the mixtures in there. So we answer the same thing, where we're talking about a case where the measurement from this one is equal to the measurement from that korban. The blood of both is the same and mixed in and went in, and even according to the opinion that says en bila, still, if it's 50-50 mixture, then we can assume that there is a representative blood from each of the korbanot that were mixed in there when you place it each of the 4 times. Matan arba b'matana ahat. And now, a question from the continuation of the Mishnah that says, let's say you have a korban olah that's supposed to be sprinkled 4 times, and that gets mixed up with blood from a korban bechor that only gets sprinkled 1 time. And here we had the machloket where Rabbi Eliezer says, well, let's assume that maybe it needs 4 times, so do a maximum, and we'll put placement 4 times just in case it's to fulfill the korban olah. And Rabbi Eliezer says, no, you can't add extra, and so we're only going to place it 1 time. Now, if you say en bila, that it's not well mixed, then when you put 4 altogether, according to Rabbi Eliezer, how do you know that within those 4 you're getting representative amounts that of the 1 and all the 4? Maybe the 1 is not getting mixed in at all, and even though you do 4 placements, none of that 1 from the bechod is getting placed on that, and you will not have fulfilled your obligation. And if you say like the answers before, we'll say over here also, where it was precisely the amount of 1 placement of the amount of blood from the bechor was 1 in 4, and all the rest of the blood was from the korban olah. So since you have a proportional representation, when you do the 4, then you can presume that one of the 4 placements was in fact the bechor blood, and then the rest of it would be all olah blood. And so if you say that, and even if you say then en bila, but if you have the proportions just right going in to it, then you can assume that some of the blood was from this and the rest of the blood was from that. If so, then Rabbi Yoshua's complaint against Rabbi Eliezer wouldn't make sense, because Rabbi Eliezer said, oh, you're putting 4 sprinklings, then you're going to violate Baal Tosif, because it could be that you're taking some of the blood of the Bechor and sprinkling it 4 times, and it's supposed to be only once, and you're violating Baal Tosif. However, if you're assuming that there's only 1 portion of Bechor blood, then that's it. You do that, sprinkle that 1 portion of Bechor blood, and you just said it's not mixed, so all the blood would of the 1 portion of Bechor would be one of the sprinklings, so you only did 1 sprinkling with Bechor blood, and all the rest of the blood is for Olah. So then there is no Baal Tosif, and if Rabbi Yoshua's complaint would not make sense, then this is not a good interpretation of the Mishnah, and therefore this we do not have an answer to, and so this is a refutation of Rav Asher's answer. And on the next daf we will offer yet a completely different interpretation of Rabbi Eliezer's view. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'Amen.